Tracy presenta el programa Fénix. La psicología del logro.
Session 12, Software for the Brain. What is the most precious resource in your life? Well, if you're like I am, your most precious resource is time. And according to all the recent studies that have been done lately, adults in America and Canada and other countries value time ahead of money in almost every instance. Now, as a result of what we've talked about in our previous sessions, with the fact that if you change your internal world, you change your external world, one of the things that begins to well up inside of you is impatience. If you believe that if you do change your internal programming, your external world will change to conform with it, then you're probably in a hurry to change that internal programming. And in this session, we're going to talk about how you can bring about rapid and permanent internal programming change. We call this session Software for the Brain. Now, I don't know a lot about computers, but I do know this. I do know that a computer has a certain amount of utility as a piece of hardware, but what makes a computer work are the programs that you run in it. And the more sophisticated and complex and productive the programs, the more valuable is the computer. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take the things that we talked about in terms of mental programming, visualization and affirmation and so on, and we're going to combine them into a series of techniques that you can use to multiply or to speed up the process at which your new thoughts and ideas are accepted by your subconscious mind and then go to work and attract them into your reality. And the first technique we're going to talk about is what I call written programming technique. It's one of the simplest of all, and yet it is so powerful that it's almost scary. Again, I've said this to many audiences, but I'll say it to you, is that if you just practice this one technique, it will be worth 10 times the time and price of this program. If it's all you learn is this one technique, it will have an astonishing difference on your results. When I first learned about this and applied it some years ago, I couldn't believe how effective it was. And all it requires to use is discipline plus one of these. Now, this is what I use. It's a spiral notebook. It costs here $1.99, Walgreens Drugs. All it has is lined pages. And what you do is you use this to write and rewrite your goals. It's very simple. You buy one for $1.99, and you use this as the basis of written programming technique. Let me explain to you how it works. Written programming technique is based on the fact that we learn or take in information three ways. We take in information auditorily. In other words, we hear the information or we speak the information. We take it in visually. We see the information, and we take it in kinesthetically as we feel the information. Now, any one of these is a good way of learning, or if you like, bringing in information to the unconscious mind. However, the more of them you can combine simultaneously, along with some of the other mental principles and programming techniques that we've talked about, the more rapidly the information is accepted. Sometimes, if you combine information in the right way, it's accepted instantaneously as a permanent change in your unconscious programming. Written programming technique is based on this, as are some of the other programming techniques which we'll talk about in the next few minutes. Written programming technique is based on the fact that when you write something down, it requires total concentration, law of concentration. You cannot write accurately and correctly and think of anything else at the same time. So writing requires concentration. It also requires intensity. It also requires visual, because you can't write without looking. And when you do write, you have a tendency to what is called sub-vocalize. In other words, you say the words to yourself as you're writing. So even though you can't hear them with a conscious ear, you hear them internally. And kinesthetically, you move and you feel. It requires tremendous mental, emotional, and physical energy to write. So written programming technique simply says this, is that every single morning, without fail, you rewrite your major goals. After you've done your reading, you rewrite your major goals. Now, this whole process, by the way, can take about 2 minutes, maybe 5. You may get to the point, as I do, where you'll write 10, 20, 30, sometimes even an hour. But you just rewrite your major goals as positive, present tense, personal affirmations. In other words, your goals could be, I earn X number of dollars per month. I weigh X number of pounds. I am outstanding in my field. I do this, I achieve, I accomplish, I choose, and so on. Whatever you want to be, have, or do, you just write it out in a series of affirmations, one at a time. Now you'll find, and we'll talk about goal setting later on, you'll find that as you write your goals over and over again, an interesting thing will happen, is that your more important goals will tend to be rewritten first, and they'll tend to become clarified and to become sharper and more distinct. And every single time you rewrite your major goals, you are driving them, you are impressing them deeper into the subconscious, which leads to the guarantee that they will be expressed in your reality. Every time you rewrite your major goals, you're programming them into your subconscious, and you're setting them as a directional mechanism, the same way you would set the directional mechanism on a guided missile, so that it will move you unerringly in the direction of accomplishing it. Number 2 is close your eyes after you've rewritten your goals. Close your eyes and visualize your major goal or goals of the day as accomplished. Visualize them as a reality. What would they look like? Now, a very valuable thing to do, by the way, is cut out clippings from magazines and books and put them in your notebook so that you can actually look at a picture. Do you want to own a brand new car or a beautiful house or something like that? Well, then get a picture of it and make a very clear picture, so when you write out the goal, you can look at the picture and then close your eyes and feed that picture into your subconscious mind. And then the third part, which is most important, is imagine the feeling of pleasure you would have. Imagine the feeling of pleasure you would have if you already owned it. Just imagine that it is already a reality. The way that you imagine that it's a reality is imagine that you are on a path toward your goal, and your goal is on a path toward you, and that there is a predestined time when you are ready and it's ready, when everything is ready, that you and the goal will meet. And that you cannot speed up the time. You can't make it go faster and you can't make it go slower, but what you can do is continually repeat the picture and the feeling and the description over and over again, and at exactly the right time and place, it will meet. Someday you'll probably write me a letter and you'll tell me how remarkably this has worked in your life, because it's worked remarkably in my life and the life of many other people. Now the second point, and before we go on with this, let me give you a key point. It's called the law of relaxation. The law of relaxation is one of the most important mental laws. The law of relaxation simply says this, that in the physical world, if you want to drive a nail, the harder you hit it, the more physical effort or energy you put behind it, the faster you accomplish something in the physical world. If you want to drive a car faster, you step on the gas, which causes the engine to work harder and propels it forward. However, in the mental realm, it's exactly the opposite. The law of relaxation says that in all mental working, effort defeats itself. In all mental working, effort defeats itself. What does this mean? It means that the harder you don't try, the better it works. Now, it's interesting. I'll give you a perfect example. Relationships. You will notice that in any relationship of yours that works, the harder you try to make a relationship work, the more difficult it is. Because a relationship is basically a meeting of minds. And whenever you just relax and let the relationship flow, the relationship unfolds exactly the way it should. If ever you try to speed something up or slow it down out of its own time, you create a crisis. You create tension, stress, and anxiety. So anything that has to do with mental working, anything that has to do with minds, and all interactions between people have to do with minds, anything that has to do with goals and dreams and plans requires that you just relax and let it unfold. That's why we say, close your eyes, visualize, imagine the feeling, and just relax without making any effort. And the more relaxed you are, the more rapidly the idea is accepted by the subconscious mind. Now, the next technique is what is called the quick affirmation technique, or quick programming technique. Quick programming technique is used specifically before any non-recurring event of importance. Before any non-recurring. That means an event that happens only once. For instance, if you're going to be in a sports event, or if you're going to go into an interview for a job or a raise, or if you're going to make a sales presentation. By the way, all top salespeople use this quick programming technique. It's very, very powerful. What it does is it has a temporary effect, but it sets you up psychologically, physically, mentally. It programs your self-concept and your subconscious to give you the words and actions and behaviors that are perfectly appropriate to the situation. All athletes use this, as we'll talk about in a second. Now, how do you use quick programming technique? Well, let us say that you have a talk coming up. A good friend of mine just gave a very important talk to 2,500 people. And he was very tense and worried about it. I said, look, this is all you have to do is each time you think about this talk that's coming up, just close your eyes and use this technique and just think like this. First of all, visualize the perfect outcome. Visualize the perfect outcome. In other words, visualize if you could script what was coming up, the interview with your boss, the sales presentation, so visualize the perfect outcome. In other words, the perfect outcome for a discussion about a raise would be the boss giving you the raise. The perfect outcome of a sales conversation is the person signing the sales order. The perfect outcome of a job application is getting the job. In this case, my friend's situation, his perfect outcome was a standing ovation. So he visualized a standing ovation. That's what he programmed into his mind. He saw the entire audience rising to their feet in a standing ovation at the end of the talk. Then affirm the visualization. In other words, it could be as simple as, this talk goes beautifully, or this talk is extremely successful, or I feel absolutely perfect going into this talk, or this talk is a complete success. In other words, give an affirmation that is consistent with it, and affirm the visualization, and then emotionalize it, or imagine how you would feel if you experienced it, and release. And this is the key word. And then just release it as though it had already happened. Just let it go. As though it had already happened, as though you were already past the event and the perfect outcome of the event has already occurred. As you release it and let it go, it drops like a computer card into the computer, and the subconscious computer goes to work on it. Powerful, powerful technique. And this technique is based on what is called mental rehearsal. Now, mental rehearsal is a technique that is used by all peak-performing men and women. It's used by all self-made millionaires, all outstanding salespeople, all top executives, all Olympic athletes, all world champions in any field use mental rehearsal. And mental rehearsal is the process of living the experience inside before you have it on the outside. That means before any event of importance, long, short-term, or short-term, what top performers do is they recall and relive excellence. They recall and relive excellence. In other words, they think of the last time that they engaged in a performance like this, and the satisfaction that they had, the pleasure that they had, the feeling of an excellent performance, and they take that feeling. It's almost like you have a screen here, and here's the screen. You take a split screen, and on this side of the screen, you recall the last time you did this in an excellent fashion. And on this side of the screen, you imagine the upcoming event. And then when you get this perfectly clearly in your mind, and you can see it with perfect clarity, that last triumph, that last success, the last sale that you closed, the last interview that went well, the last successful party or meeting or social engagement, then you transfer this into the new situation that's upcoming, and you transfer the feeling and the experience, and you overlay the two, so that as you anticipate the upcoming experience, you combine it with the feelings of success and pleasure and joy of the previous excellent experience. What that does is it programs the subconscious mind for you to go into that experience and engage in the same words, actions, and behaviors that got you the results of success and winning the last time. Now, what is the difference between winners and losers? Major difference between winners and losers. Can you imagine what it is? Winners versus losers. It's simply this, is that we all engage in mental rehearsal. You, me, everybody. The difference between winners and losers is this, is that prior to every event, upcoming event, losers think of the last time they went into an experience like this and it didn't work out. They think of their previous failures. They vividly imagine and think about how embarrassed, humiliated, unsuccessful, how badly they felt, and the losers relive and recall failure and poor performance. The winners insist upon reliving and recalling excellence and success. So you can tell if you're destined to be a winner or a loser simply by looking at what you think about in each upcoming event. And if you just make the decision right now to think about what you desire, ask yourself, am I thinking about what I want to happen, or am I thinking about what I'm afraid will happen? Remember, the natural tendency is to think about what you're afraid of, not what you desire. So force your mind, using the law of substitution, take your mind off of what you fear and refuse to entertain it. There's a beautiful technique that I learned many years ago. Whenever you start to think about something that's causing you to be upset or anxious or tense, just say this word very, very loud to yourself. Say, stop. Stop. It's very much the same as knocking the side of a record player and joking the needle off the record player, or slamming on a tape recorder, or shouting at a person who's saying something. Just say, stop. And what it will do is temporarily it will stop your mind. And as it stops your mind, then switch your attention onto what you desire. And insist upon thinking about what you desire. And every single time you find your thoughts drifting back to what you're afraid of, say stop and get your mind onto what you desire. Here's a very simple diagram or graph. And it's like this. This is what you desire. This is what you fear. Now, here are you on this slope between what you desire and what you fear, going up or going down. This, however, is easy. The natural tendency of human nature is to focus on what is negative and to slide back into what they fear, what is the worst possible outcome. This requires effort. It requires a consistent effort to keep your mind on what you want. Now, most people are lazy. Most people are undisciplined. Most people are not willing to make the effort. So what they do is they have a tendency to slide into thinking about what is the worst thing that can possibly happen. They slide into negativity. That's why the great majority of people today are negative, and very few people are positive. So be alert to that, is that whenever you find yourself thinking about something that's coming up in advance, it's natural to be filled with doubt and fear. Are natural human tendencies for a variety of reasons that we've talked about before. But the superior human being keeps their mind on what they want. The superior human being stops the negative thoughts. The superior human being concentrates on excellent performance. Now, somebody will say, well, I've never done it before. How can I concentrate, or how can I recall and relive excellence? Easy, in your imagination. You can pretend and imagine that you've done this before. Pretend that you've already succeeded at this. Think about how you would act if you were a superb success in this area. Walk as though you were a success. In neurolinguistic programming, they find that there is a physiological state or way of walking, talking, and acting that is consistent with every emotional state. And that if you walk and talk and act the same way you would if you felt confident, as we said earlier, you'll actually feel the feelings of confidence that go with the behavior. Very important. Now, here's another technique. It's called standard programming technique or standard affirmation technique. And this technique is done with cards, index cards. Or you can use just a series of goals on a piece of paper. Very powerful technique. What you do with this is that, and here's the steps to standard affirmation techniques. You set your goals. You can set 10 to 15 goals. Your subconscious mind can work on 10 to 15 goals at a time. Of course, you have to have your goals in priority, but you don't have to worry about that. About 10 to 15 goals. Number 2 is you take twice daily, morning and evening. Twice daily, morning and evening. You take some time off, where number 3, you can be with no interruptions. And then you write out your goals, again in the form of positive present tense personal affirmations. Okay? Goals as positive present tense personal affirmations on cards. Now, many people advise that you use index cards so that you can slide the cards back and forth like this. And just put one on top of the other and write your goal in very, very large, clear letters so that the subconscious mind can see the goal with crystal clarity. And then you sit down with the goals and you read the goal to yourself. You read the goal or the affirmation to yourself. Read, repeat, and then close your eyes. So let us say the goal is I earn $50,000 a year. So we'll say on the card, I earn $50,000 a year. I earn $50,000 a year. You read it, you repeat it, I earn $50,000 a year. Close your eyes and repeat it 3 to 5 times. Repeat the goal 3 to 5 times. And then step number 6 is visualize the outcome. In other words, if you earned $50,000 a year, what would be the outcome? Would it be a bigger car? Would it be a bigger house? Would it be a trip to Tahiti? Would it be a different wardrobe? Would it be a Rolex watch? In other words, visualize the outcome, not the process so much as what the result would be. Or another thing that you can do, by the way, is you can visualize the work. Let us say that you are going to earn $50,000 a year, and you imagine you will earn it in your existing profession. Then visualize yourself doing the work in such an excellent fashion that it will actually generate the income. And then step number 7 is imagine the feeling. Imagine the feeling that would accompany the accomplishment of your goal. Imagine the feeling. Close your eyes, and as you sit there with your cards, looking at your cards, imagine the feeling of satisfaction as though the goal is already accomplished. Imagine the feeling of pleasure. Imagine the feeling of accomplishment. Let us say that what you're going to do is you're going to give yourself a trip to Tahiti. You're going to go to the South Seas. You're going to lay on the beach. You're going to swim in the beautiful surf. You're going to soak up the sun and get this beautiful tan. Then start thinking about that. Another thing that you can do, by the way, is get brochures on Tahiti. Get a poster of Tahiti. Get a poster of a cruise ship. Get pictures of the things that you're going to do and have and enjoy that you associate, because the more emotions you can associate with the accomplishment of the goal, the more rapidly the subconscious accepts it as an instruction, and the more rapidly you go to work on it. Now here's what I use, by the way. Here's what you can use. You can use cards like this, which are just index cards. These ones don't have any lines, but you can use cards with lines, and you just sit there and you just write out your goal, and as you read the goal, repeat it 3 to 5 times, imagine it, visualize it, see yourself doing whatever is necessary, visualize the outcome, and then just change the card and go on to the next one. The more relaxed you are when you do this exercise, because of the law of relaxation, the more rapidly the subconscious accepts it. Here's something else that you might want to get. It's one of these spiral cards with index cards throughout it that you can write a variety of different affirmations on, carry it around with you, and just flip it. Write affirmations down. Whenever you think of something that you want, write it down, and then just take some time every so often to review your affirmations. Now, one final technique is what is called sports programming technique, which combines all the others. It's used by all top Olympic athletes. It combines mental rehearsal and relaxation. It's based on what is called autogenic conditioning, which means that if you want to become better at a sport, the technique is very simple. First of all, get some instruction in the sport. Learn from an expert. Study and learn what excellent performance in the sport constitutes. Second of all, before you go to sleep or sitting in a very relaxed position, take several deep, deep breaths and relax your body, and then visualize perfect sports performance. Say you want to be a better skier. Very simple. What you do is you learn how to ski, you look at films and pictures of people skiing excellently, and then you visualize yourself actually being the skier. You close your eyes and you do 2 types of visualization. The first type of visualization is where you look at yourself actually skiing. You look at yourself and you look at your performance. Look at yourself going down the slope. Look at yourself turning, putting in the poles, twisting, and so on. You look at yourself skiing beautifully and watch yourself going almost as though you were a spectator. The second part of the visualization is you then shift your point of attention and you look at yourself from your own eyes and actually see yourself going down the slope. Sports affirmation technique is used by all the major football teams, the basketball teams, the major figure skaters, the top golfers. Virtually all Olympic athletes train in their minds over and over again. For instance, skaters will sit down, close their eyes, put on their music, and then they will go through their entire skating routine in their minds while their music is playing. What happens is, of course, that in your mind you never fall. So they program their minds over and over again. And this is based on a very simple fact, is that every time we visualize an action, we actually send measurable impulses of nerve energy to the legs, arms, muscles, and nerves that would control the muscles that we would use if we actually engaged in that action. If you want to be a better golfer, better skier, better tennis player, better baseball player, swimmer, better public speaker, better anything, you can use sports affirmation technique to bring about rapid programming changes. The key is this: repetition, visualization, relaxation, and clarity of your goals over and over again until they are accepted by the subconscious mind as facts, until they begin to become true in your reality. And if you stick with it, it will work for you.